Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a quieter kind of strength. The kind that doesn't shout back, doesn't need to win, and doesn't flinch when the world throws words like stones. Tonight we're going to explore how Epictetus, once a slave with a twisted leg and no control over his body, somehow found complete control over his mind. How he could smile in the face of insult, not out of defiance, but because he knew the truth of who he was. Out there the day might have been chaotic. Maybe someone misunderstood you. Maybe a comment stuck in your head longer than it should have. But here in this space, you can let it all settle. You can remember. You will never control the world, but you can control yourself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're joining me from somewhere far, or it's a strange hour in your part of the world, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where this quiet little circle reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself walking, not on any road you know, but in that gentle landscape between memory and dream. The sky is a deep, dark blue like velvet soaking in twilight, and the air is quiet but not empty. It hums with something old, something you've always known but forgot you remembered. You pause. In the distance, someone is laughing. Not a joyous laugh. No, it's sharper, coated in mockery. It's the kind of laugh that used to sting, that used to crawl under your skin and settle there. You feel a tug inside like the old you is about to rise, the you that reacts, that defends, that explains, that fights invisible battles with voices that don't even stay to listen. But tonight, something is different. You remember the man who walked through insults like mist. The man who once stood in a crowded market, mocked openly by a passerby who hurled words like rotten fruit. And Epictetus, he simply smiled. Not the smirk of sarcasm, not a grin of superiority. A soft, simple smile, as if the insult had passed through him like wind through empty cloth. How? That's the question that holds you tonight. You feel the weight of that moment, not just the insult but the silence after it. The silence in which most of us begin to stitch stories. Why did they say that? Was it true? What do others think? What do I do now? But for Epictetus, that silence was freedom, because he had no interest in picking up what wasn't his. Words thrown at you are still just words until you catch them. You walk a bit further. The path grows softer under your feet like worn earth. You remember a time you were mocked. Maybe it was subtle, maybe it was public, maybe it came from someone whose opinion once mattered too much. That tightness in your chest, it starts to soften now. Epictetus knew something most people forget. When someone insults you, they're not revealing truth. They're revealing themselves, their impatience, their pain, their judgments, their need to feel taller by making someone else feel small. And suddenly you realize, their words were never really about you. You slow your breath. You feel the body you're in, the quiet rhythm of your chest rising and falling, the warmth of your palms resting beside you. You exist. That's enough. You don't need to be explained. You don't need to justify your presence in the room or the world. You imagine Epictetus again, not just as a philosopher but as a man, a slave, a cripple, a target, and yet deeply free. His master once broke his leg and he said, "If you keep twisting it, it will break." It broke, and he said simply, "I told you so." No rage, no vengeance, just clarity, just presence. What kind of inner space does it take to meet violence with that kind of steadiness? You feel a paradox take root in your chest. The man with no rights, no wealth, no worldly power had more power than most kings, because he didn't need anyone to validate him. He didn't beg for respect. He didn't demand fairness. He simply was, untouched by the illusions of ego. And here you are, listening in the dark, wondering if you could live that way too. Could you hear an insult and not pick it up? Could you let words pass through you like leaves on water? Could you smile not because you're trying to win, but because you know there's nothing to lose? You notice your shoulders have softened, your jaw has unclenched, something is releasing. You remember, your peace is not a negotiation. It's not something you owe to the moods of the world. It's yours to hold or not. There's a soft sound in the distance again, maybe the echo of that first laugh, but now it no longer stings. You've seen where it ends. You've seen where it began, not in you but in someone else's storm. You smile, not out of victory, not out of pride, just because. And in that smile there is silence. And in that silence there is peace. You walk a little further now, your feet moving without urgency. The sky hasn't changed, but maybe something inside you has. You feel the quiet growing, not silence from the outside, but the kind that begins when the storms within begin to settle. A new scene begins to take shape. You're no longer on a dream path, you're in a dim stone chamber, bare, cold. There's a figure seated cross-legged on the floor. His robe is simple, frayed at the edges. His leg is bent oddly. But his eyes are steady, untroubled, as though the world around him were just a passing cloud. This is Epictetus, not the legend, not the statue in the mind, but the man, flesh and breath, once a slave, owned by another human being. His body hurt, limited, controlled, but inside, where no chain could reach, he was free. And now you remember, he wasn't born wise, he was born into limitation, shackled not just by iron but by circumstance. He belonged to someone else. His leg was twisted, damaged by cruelty, not accident. His master held his fate in his hands. At any moment, punishment could descend without cause or warning. Yet somehow he began to master the one thing no one could take from him, his response. You breathe in deeply. The idea that someone could live without outer freedom, yet still be truly free, that's the Stoic seed. Tonight you let it sink into the soil of your thoughts. Picture it, a young Epictetus sitting in that same bare room, listening to the lectures of a Stoic teacher. Words about virtue, choice, and what is in our power. At first they're just words, intellectual concepts, but slowly they take root in him, not in his intellect but in his being. You imagine the first time he understood the principle that would define his life. There are things within our control and things beyond it. Simple, so simple it almost slips past you. But isn't that always the case with truth? You pause, letting that divide unfold before you, like a line in the sand. On one side, your opinions, your desires, your reactions, your will. On the other, the weather, other people, accidents, insults, applause, fate. Epictetus learned to live entirely on his side of the line. He didn't try to control whether his master would be cruel. He didn't imagine justice in a world that wasn't just. He didn't pray to be loved, respected, or even remembered. He only focused on what kind of man he would be. And here's the first gentle paradox. When you stop chasing what's outside your power, you begin to taste the flavor of real freedom. You walk through this thought like a corridor. How often have you spent your day trying to nudge the world into being softer, kinder, more rewarding? How much of your anxiety came from trying to script someone else's behavior? Imagine what would change if you stepped back, not in defeat, but in quiet understanding. They are who they are. The world is what it is. I only need to tend my own garden. You feel that garden now, in the soft space of your chest, in the slow rhythm of your breath. It's yours, completely. No one else can walk into it unless you open the gate. No insult can enter unless you leave the door wide. You think back to Epictetus, that young man absorbing Stoic teachings not as decoration, but as survival. And you wonder, what must it be like to hear your master call you worthless and feel nothing crumble, not numbness, not pride, just stillness? You imagine him turning inward. Is that true? He asks himself. And if it is, he'll improve. And if it's not, he lets it go. No need to protest. No need to defend. He knows the truth of who he is, and that is enough. Tonight, as your body lies heavier, your mind feels lighter. You no longer need to be carried by every breeze of opinion. You no longer need to chase dignity in someone else's eyes. You begin to glimpse the deeper lesson Epictetus left behind, not just in his words, but in his life. You do not need perfect conditions to be whole. He had none. He had pain, poverty, obscurity. But he also had joy, not the kind found in indulgence, but the joy of integrity. the peace of nothing to hide, the calm of a life pointed always toward virtue, even in chains. The world around you quiets again. Maybe it's your room, maybe your breath, maybe your thoughts finally resting their wings. You feel a question float gently up from inside. If a man in bondage could find joy, what excuse do I have to abandon mine? It's not a harsh question, not meant to shame. Just a soft reminder, peace doesn't wait for permission. You don't need the world to make room for it. You only need to make room within. You return now to that inner chamber, the one that looks a lot like the place you're lying in now. Sparse, still, full of space. The man is still there, still seated in calm. You realize now you're not just watching him. You're beginning to become him, not in form, but in mind, in spirit, in the way you breathe through tension without grasping for control, in the way you let that last sharp word echo and fade without naming it hurt, in the way you understand that you are not insulted unless you agree to play the part. You hear a whisper, not a voice exactly, more like something remembered. They can chain your body but not your will. You hold that truth now, and suddenly the idea of smiling at an insult no longer feels foreign. It feels possible, even natural, not as a mask, but as a quiet victory. You stir gently in your stillness like a boat shifting slightly on a quiet lake. The air feels softer now, lighter, and yet in your chest there's something deepening, not a heaviness, but an anchoring. You revisit a familiar feeling, that flicker of heat behind the eyes, the sudden clench in the gut, the way your shoulders rise before you even know why. It's not a fist, it's not a scream, but it's there, the instinct to react. Someone said something. You didn't like it. Your stomach turned, and now a dozen replies spin inside your head, each more cutting than the last. You play the scene back like a loop, your imagined comeback growing sharper, colder, wittier. And yet when you finally speak it, if you do, it only leaves you tired. You remember now what Epictetus taught so patiently. What others say belongs to them. It is not yours unless you claim it. You slow your breath. Let the truth of that wash over you. That which is not yours cannot harm you. It's such a simple statement, and yet, how often have you taken ownership of someone else's judgment, their careless tone, their frustration, their insult dressed as just being honest? How often did you believe that because it hurt, it must be true? But pain isn't proof of truth. Pain is just sensation, a signal. And sometimes it's misfired, like a smoke alarm in a kitchen where nothing's burning. Epictetus once said that fame, insult, and reputation are like shadows on the wall. They move, they shift, but they are not the substance of who you are. To cling to them, to chase them, or fear them is to give up your sovereignty. You imagine yourself now in a bustling room, people talking, opinions flying like arrows. Some are aimed at you. You feel their point. But then you do something new. You pause, you ask yourself, is this mine to carry? You picture the words as objects tossed at your feet. Some are ugly, sharp. Others are just misunderstood, but you don't pick them up. You don't strap them to your back like weights. You simply see them and keep walking. A paradox ripples quietly. True strength sometimes looks like not responding at all. That doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise. Epictetus knew this. That's why he often spoke of ownership, not of property, but of thought, of focus, of responsibility. Your mind is the only true territory you control, not your body, not your reputation, not even your relationships, just your judgments, your will, your response. And here's the twist that makes you smile in the dark. Sometimes the very things people try to throw at you, insults, assumptions, mockery, aren't even aimed at the real you. They're aimed at a version of you that lives in their head. A sketch, a caricature, and what a relief to know you don't need to defend what isn't even real. You let that land. You don't need to defend what isn't even real. Let them talk to their version. Let them argue with their own projections. You remain grounded in yourself, solid, quiet, free. This is the first real taste of freedom Epictetus invites you to sip. The ability to stand beside someone else's judgment and feel no need to agree. Not even silently. You breathe into that. And you remember another image, Epictetus walking the streets of Rome. Someone calls him a cripple, loudly. Intending humiliation, he smiles, turns calmly. "Yes," he says, "but you forgot the rest. I have a lame leg, not a lame mind." There's no venom in it, no sting, only clarity, because he knew the truth of his condition. He knew his body didn't define him. He knew he had no reason to pretend, to protest, or to convince. He accepted what was true and dismissed what was not. You carry that image into your own life. Think now of something someone said about you, something that stuck. Maybe from years ago, maybe just this morning. Their words rang in your ears and dug roots into your thoughts, but now bring them to the surface. Hold them gently in your palm. Examine them. Are they yours, or did you just agree to carry them? Maybe it's time to set them down. No anger, no grand gesture, just a soft returning. "This is not mine." You notice your body loosening again. The jaw, the shoulders, the soft place behind your eyes. You're not erasing who you are. You're just letting go of who you're not. Another paradox hums. To care less about what others think, you must care more about the truth. Not your ego. Not your pride, the quiet truth underneath all of it. And if that truth is flawed, so what? Epictetus would say, then fix it, but don't waste a minute on lies. You feel your breath, slow and steady now, a rhythm that belongs only to you. You've crossed into that inner room again, the one only you can enter. And this time it's a little brighter, because you didn't let someone else's shadow dim your light. You didn't pick up what wasn't yours. And somehow that feels like the beginning of peace. The light in your mind now softens, like the last glow of evening pressing gently against a quiet window. The storm of reactivity has calmed, and you begin to sense something rarer: space. That rare, beautiful space between stimulus and response. You're starting to understand what Epictetus meant by freedom, not the kind that opens doors or builds empires, a quieter kind. The freedom to choose your internal state, even when the external world presses hard against you. And so you return to a memory, not one you've lived yet, but one you recognize in your bones. You're walking down a street, perhaps in your town, perhaps in your imagination, and someone brushes past you with a sharp look. They mutter something. Maybe it's an insult, maybe it's just noise, but it lands. Old you would tense, rehearse a retort, replay the moment on a loop. But not now. Now something else arises. A pause, a breath, a question: is this really about me? Often you'll find it's not. Because what Epictetus realized long ago, and what you begin to see now, is that people don't act from truth. They act from pain, confusion, habit, fear. When someone insults you, they are often revealing more about their inner landscape than yours. A bitter comment is a symptom. A mockery is a mask. An angry tone is usually a spillover from some other wound. So Epictetus teaches a counterintuitive move. Instead of reacting with offense, respond with curiosity or even compassion. You picture this clearly now. Epictetus, once mocked for his limp, did not strike back. He observed. He sometimes even laughed, not at them, but at the idea that such words could change his sense of self. And here is your paradox of the night. When you take nothing personally, you gain the power to see clearly. You think about the last time someone lashed out at you, maybe online, maybe in person, and now from a distance you look again, not at the words but at the person behind them. You might see someone tired, someone insecure, someone who learned that power comes from dominance because they were never taught gentleness. And now you ask, is this someone I want to give control over my mood? You smile quietly. Of course not. And yet how many times have you handed them the keys to your peace? There's no shame in it, only awareness. This is the Stoic practice, not perfection but practice, a training of perception, a return again and again to what is in your power. And you begin to notice something extraordinary. Insults lose their sting not because they change, but because you do. You shift from being the receiver of arrows to the observer of their aimlessness. They pass through you like wind through trees. And in that shift, a gentleness emerges. You realize the one who insults is often the one in the most pain. You picture a child lashing out. Would you insult them back? Or would you gently redirect? Epictetus didn't see himself above others, but he saw clearly. He saw that insults are borrowed tools from those who have not yet built anything better. And now you feel something surprising. Not just calm, but maybe even love. Not the warm, poetic kind. The kind that simply says, I don't need you to be different for me to be at peace. This is a radical idea. It means your serenity isn't held hostage by anyone else's behavior. Not your partner, not your boss, not the stranger at the crosswalk. You don't wait for the world to apologize before you rest. You don't wait for them to understand before you release the burden. Instead, you become the kind of person who hears the insult, sees the intention behind it, and responds with silence, or better yet, with serenity. You walk back through your own memories now, not to relive them, but to bless them. The moment you were called too much, the time you were mocked for dreaming, the jab that was meant to keep you small. You walk through each of them like rooms in a museum, touching nothing, simply observing. You say softly, I don't carry you anymore. And like leaves in the current, the words float away. Now you notice something else. That stillness you've been cultivating, it's not passive. It's powerful. It takes real strength to remain soft when the world invites you to harden. It takes courage to choose your values over your pride. And you remember again what Epictetus taught, not just through speeches, but through his walk, his gaze, his bearing. The person who cannot be insulted cannot be controlled. You let that echo. Because how often has the world tried to manage you through approval or shame? And how free would you be if those tools no longer worked on you? You're starting to see it now. Insults are just air. Judgments are just echoes. You are the one who gives them weight. And tonight, you can choose to give them nothing. So you rest now in a different kind of quiet. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of inner resistance. You feel your shoulders unclench, not because the world changed, but because you did. That's the Stoic gift, not the promise that the world will be gentle, but the assurance that you can be regardless. And as your breath continues, slow, even, kind, you are not waiting to be uninsulted. You are learning to be uninsultable. Somewhere in the stillness of your breath, a shift has taken place. You no longer feel like the person you were when the story began. Not dramatically, not loudly, but undeniably. Like a tree noticing the first light of dawn on its leaves, you are beginning to see what freedom from reaction truly feels like. You're no longer clenching against the world. You're listening. And so tonight, let's walk into something even deeper, the art of letting go of control. It's easy to imagine Epictetus as serene, but it wasn't because life went easy on him. He had no status, no property, no promises. His body didn't even fully cooperate. His leg, damaged during his enslavement, never healed. And yet his peace ran deep, not despite all that, but because of it. Because he understood this foundational Stoic truth: what is not in your control is not your concern. You've heard this before, maybe in a quote on a wall, maybe in someone's Instagram bio. But here in this quiet moment, you don't just read it, you live it, feel it in your hands. Now close them, tightly. Pretend you're trying to hold onto everything: people's opinions, outcomes, expectations, health, weather, money, news, legacy, the way others treat you, the way the world sees you. Notice how your body feels. Tense, anxious, resistant. Now open your hands, release it all. Notice the change. Your muscles soften, your breath deepens. Nothing has changed in the world, but everything has changed in you. That's the paradox. Surrender isn't defeat, it's clarity. You don't give up your power when you stop controlling what isn't yours. You reclaim it. Because now your energy, your focus, your presence can flow into what is yours. Your choices, your words, your daily disciplines. Your response to this exact moment, right here, right now. You remember how Epictetus used to say that we are like actors on a stage, not the playwright, not the director, but the performer. We don't choose the play. We don't control the script, but we can choose to perform our part with excellence, grace, and integrity. And some nights your part might be sorrow. Some mornings your role is patience. Other days, you're asked to stand firm while everything shifts. But in all of it, one thing remains yours, your choice of how to meet the moment. Let that sink in. Let it liberate you. Because the moment you release your grip on what isn't yours, you open up space inside yourself. Room for peace, for calm, for action rooted in presence, not panic. Think now of something that's been bothering you. Not a small irritation, but a persistent frustration. Maybe it's someone you can't seem to change, or a situation that won't resolve. A lingering sense of why won't this be different? Now ask yourself with compassion, is this mine to control or mine to accept? You might feel a little resistance here. That's okay. It's natural. We're taught that letting go means giving up, that if we don't stay anxious, we're being careless. That acceptance is laziness. But Epictetus saw through that illusion. He knew that true agency begins where illusion ends. So he focused only on what was his. He didn't try to control the Roman Empire. He didn't try to change his master's cruelty. He didn't waste breath demanding a different life. He shaped his character like a sculptor. He trained his mind like an athlete. And he practiced gratitude, not because everything was good, but because he could still choose goodness. You feel that now, you think of something unresolved, and you whisper softly, courageously, I release this. And something shifts, not in the situation, but in you. There's lightness in your chest, a little space behind your eyes, the grip is gone. And now you begin to notice something else. Your mind is quieter. You're no longer negotiating with reality. You're sitting with it. You're being with it. You're present. And in that presence, a strange, beautiful possibility arises. What if this moment, just as it is enough? What if your peace doesn't need to wait for resolution? What if this exact, imperfect now is where freedom begins? A quiet smile plays across your lips, not because everything is solved, but because it doesn't need to be. The philosopher in you is waking up. The part of you that knows how little you actually need in order to be whole. You remember something Epictetus said, that if you want to be invincible, don't enter contests where you can't win. He didn't mean avoid difficulty. He meant, don't base your peace on what isn't yours. Don't tie your well-being to what others choose or what life gives or what tomorrow might hold. Instead, tie it to something no one can take. Your intention, your discipline, your grace, and above all, your ability to return again and again to this breath, this body, this choice. So tonight you let go of control, gently, lovingly, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to trust that your peace doesn't depend on anything else. You don't need to force the river. You just need to flow with it. The night has grown softer now. Not because the world outside has changed, but because you have. You've stepped through the doors of silence and into something rare, inner spaciousness. A place where your identity is no longer tangled in opinions, no longer clawing at outcomes, no longer bargaining with the past. Tonight, let's stay there, just a little longer. Because now you're ready for something subtle and brave, letting go of expectations. You might not even realize how many expectations you carry. Like invisible strings pulling at your thoughts, tugging at your heart, quietly insisting, it should be different. They should know. I should be further along. Expectations are dressed like hope, but they often carry the seed of suffering. Epictetus understood this, perhaps more clearly than anyone. He watched his students wrestle with disappointment, not from what was, but from what they thought should have been. He saw the pain of betrayal, the ache of ambition unmet, the slow burn of a promise broken. And he whispered a simple truth, one that has echoed for centuries. You are not disturbed by events, but by your opinion of them. Think about that. You aren't upset because something happened. You're upset because it didn't happen the way you expected. And so you sit with this now. You look back on a moment where you felt let down. Maybe someone didn't show up for you. Maybe a door you worked so hard to open stayed closed. Maybe life simply took a turn you hadn't planned for. Now look at it again, but from a stiller place. Instead of asking why did this happen, you ask what am I adding to this moment? And you realize much of your pain came from a story layered over the event. They should have known better. This means I'm not good enough. I can't believe this happened to me. These are the branches, but the root, expectation. And in Stoicism, the remedy isn't denial, it's preparation. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It sounds grim, but it's not. It's the gentle, wise practice of reminding yourself things may not go as planned. You're not inviting disaster, just refusing to be surprised by it. So you begin to practice. You prepare your mind like a sailor checks the sails before weather comes. You say, people might misunderstand me. That's okay. My efforts may not be recognized. That's not why I do them. This plan might change. I'll adapt. And with every expectation you loosen, your peace grows stronger. Here's your quiet paradox for tonight. The fewer expectations you place on the world, the more wonder it can offer you. Because when you stop demanding that people act a certain way, you become free to see how they actually are. When you stop needing a moment to be impressive, you begin to notice its simplicity. And when you no longer expect anything from the future, you finally start to inhabit the present. Now take a breath. Let it be unforced. Let it be enough. That's what you're learning to say to life. This is enough. Not out of resignation, but out of reverence. You begin to notice how often you miss the moment you're in because you're clinging to a version you imagined. You miss the laughter of a friend because you're replaying a meeting that didn't go well. You miss the beauty of an ordinary evening because you're forecasting tomorrow's schedule. You miss your own quiet joy because you expect joy to look different, louder, shinier, more remarkable. But tonight there's nothing to wait for. This moment, this quiet, spacious, breath-filled now is everything. And so you shift gently into a new stance, not grasping, not bracing, receiving. You allow the world to be what it is, and in doing so, you become more present to what you are. You stop demanding and you start noticing. The subtle hum of air around you, the slow rhythm of your chest rising and falling, the tiny muscles in your face softening. You didn't expect this moment, but here it is. And in its simplicity, there's grace. You recall now a story of Epictetus, teaching his students after being mocked by someone in the street. He smiled, not because it didn't bother him, but because he expected nothing else. He said to his students, almost with amusement, "Would you expect a person who is blind to see?" He didn't blame people for not living up to ideals. He met them where they were and chose peace anyway. That's not passivity, that's freedom. You can do the same. You're not lowering your standards. You're releasing your demands. You're not giving up on others. You're giving up the belief that your peace depends on their perfection. And in that surrender, something rare blooms, gratitude. Not the kind you perform, the kind that simply arises. Because without expectations, every moment is a gift. Every kindness is a surprise. Every breath is a miracle. Even now, your body feels lighter, not because your burdens are gone, but because your grip on them is. And as you rest deeper into this knowing, a quiet question lingers like mist over a still lake. What else might you receive if you stopped expecting and simply began noticing? Tonight, you let go of the map, the plan, the imagined ideal, and in its place, you hold something softer, the unfolding of what is. You're floating now, effortless, like a feather let go by the hand that once held it too tightly. You've loosened your grip on control, softened your hold on expectation. And in return, life has begun to meet you, not as a struggle to win, but as a rhythm to flow with. Now there's space for something else to arise, something we often resist, even as it waits patiently in the background of every quiet moment, acceptance of mortality. It might feel strange to go there tonight, but here in the hush of this hour you realize this is the perfect moment. Because to the Stoics, death was not something to fear. It was something to understand, to bring close, like a candle in the dark. Not to worship it, not to dwell, but to let its presence illuminate what matters most. Epictetus would often say, "You are a soul carrying a corpse." It sounds morbid, doesn't it? But look deeper. It wasn't a dismissal of the body. It was a call to wake up, to recognize what is truly you and what is only on temporary loan. You feel it now, your breath warm and rhythmic. This body that has carried you through heartbreak and laughter, it is precious. and it is temporary. And that's what makes it sacred. Tonight you don't run from that truth, you walk with it, you sit beside it, and slowly you realize the fear of death loses power when you stop pretending it won't come. It becomes a companion, a teacher, one that invites you not to despair, but to live fully now. That's the paradox of it. Remembering that life ends doesn't make it smaller, it makes it vast. You notice now how often we live as if we had forever, how we postpone tenderness, delay joy, store away words we meant to say, and then we're surprised when the moment slips through our fingers. But Epictetus didn't live like that. He reminded his students gently and often to look at those they love and silently say, "They are mortal like me. They are on loan like me." Not to harden the heart, but to awaken it. To look at a friend and see them, really see them, not as background but as a miracle. To walk into a quiet afternoon and whisper, "This may never come again." Not with panic, with presence. So tonight you practice. You think of someone you love deeply, quietly, without condition. And you say silently, "They are mortal." So am I. Notice what rises. Maybe a sting. Maybe a sense of awe. Maybe a softness that spreads across your chest. This is not a thought to dwell in constantly. It's a lens to pick up now and then, to help you see clearly, tenderly. You turn the lens now toward yourself. This body, this mind, this breath, it will not last forever. And yet, instead of fear, you feel liberation. Because now, you no longer need to postpone what matters. You no longer need to waste energy trying to be remembered forever. You can live deeply and fully now. You can choose what Epictetus called a beautiful death, not because it's dramatic, but because it follows a beautiful life. A life of presence, a life of principle, a life where you look each day in the eye and say, "I have done what is mine to do." This is not about perfection, it's about intention. A Stoic doesn't try to live forever. They try to live well, moment by moment, choice by choice. And when death comes, they greet it as a familiar face. Because they've practiced this farewell in small ways all along. When the sun sets, when a chapter closes, when a silence deepens. So now you breathe in and breathe out, and you say, "I am here, I am alive, and I am not afraid to let go." You recall how Marcus Aurelius, another student of Stoicism, wrote to himself late in life, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years." He wasn't scolding. He was reminding himself gently, time is short. Live wisely. You feel that wisdom now, and instead of sorrow, you feel reverence. Reverence for your heart, which has continued to beat through grief and joy. Reverence for the strangers who crossed your path and left something behind, whether love or laughter or lesson. Reverence for this moment, this breath, this stillness that wraps around you like warm silk. You've met death tonight not as a shadow but as a mirror. And in its reflection, you've seen how radiant your life truly is. The quiet miracle of it all, that you are here, that you have this breath, that you get to choose again and again how to live. So you release the fear, not because it's foolish, but because it no longer serves you. And instead, you hold this truth close. Memento mori, not to fear but to cherish. Remember that you will die so that you may truly live. You lie there breathing and something feels different. You are no longer clinging, not to how things should be, not to how long they should last. And from this place of release, another kind of strength emerges. Quiet, rooted, immovable, not the strength of armor but the strength of freedom. Tonight, you walk gently into one of the deepest lessons the Stoics offered. No one can harm your inner self. It sounds almost too bold, doesn't it? But Epictetus meant it, and he lived it. You remember now, he was born a slave, his body once bent under cruelty. And yet in his teachings he says calmly, "You may chain my leg, but not even Zeus can overpower my will." He didn't mean he never suffered. He meant that nothing external could touch who he truly was. And this is where the Stoic path becomes radical. Because it asks you to consider, what if nothing outside you has power over your peace? Not insults, not poverty, not failure, not even death. Only your own judgment has that power. Pause with that. Let it settle. You begin to remember a moment someone said something sharp and it pierced you. But what pierced you wasn't just their words. It was your belief in those words. It was your internal yes, whispered unconsciously. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am unworthy. That's the place where pain blooms. But if you change your inner response, if you withhold that yes, suddenly the words fall flat, like arrows shot into fog. Epictetus knew this well. He taught his students again and again, if someone speaks ill of you and it is false, why be upset? And if it is true, why be angry? It sounds like a riddle, but it's an invitation. An invitation to step back, to hold your identity lightly, to remember. You are not your reputation. You are not your possessions. You are not the stories others tell about you. You are the one who decides what those stories mean. And when you realize that, truly realize it, something extraordinary happens. You become unshakable. Even in the storm, your center holds. You think of a tree now. Its branches whip in the wind, leaves scatter, but its roots are deep. It does not panic, because it knows this wind cannot touch what matters. So too, you begin to root yourself, not in what others see, but in who you are when no one's looking. Not in how life treats you, but in how you respond. Here comes your paradox for the night. The more invulnerable your inner self becomes, the more gently you treat the world. Because once you stop needing others to validate you, you no longer need to dominate them. Once you stop fearing insults, you no longer need to prove anything. And once you recognize that true harm can only come from within, you become infinitely more forgiving. Like Epictetus, who was mocked, beaten, dismissed, and smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain stopped at the surface. It never reached his soul. He had drawn a line there, and now so can you. You imagine it now, a quiet line between what's yours and what isn't. Your thoughts, yours, your actions, yours, your values, yours, other people's judgments, not yours, their praise, not yours, their chaos, not yours to fix, absorb, or carry. And with that realization comes space, not to detach coldly, but to stand warmly in your own integrity, to listen without absorbing, to help without losing yourself, to speak with clarity, not defensiveness. You're learning, slowly and gently, what it means to be internally free, not the kind of freedom others grant you, the kind that comes from within and cannot be taken. You feel it now like a small candle inside your chest. It flickers, but it does not go out. And when the wind of life rises again, and it will, you'll remember, this is my space. This is my stillness. This is untouched. You take another breath now, slower, deeper, more your own. And you whisper inwardly, perhaps for the first time in a while, I am whole. No matter what. The world may never understand you fully. It may misjudge you, mislabel you, misunderstand your motives. But that's not where your value comes from. And so you begin to relax even deeper, into this truth, into this moment, into this strength. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to believe what Epictetus already knew. The most powerful person is the one who cannot be harmed by anything they cannot control. And that person, you are becoming them. Something has shifted, not suddenly, but like morning light quietly filling a room. You don't force it. You don't chase it. You just notice. This calm inside you, it's not armor. It's not detachment. It's clarity. And tonight, we explore one of the most liberating, yet challenging, truths Epictetus ever offered. Expectation is the root of suffering. It's almost too simple, but think about it. How often do you feel upset not because of what is, but because it doesn't match what you thought it should be? You expected a kind reply. You got silence. You expected success. You got a setback. You expected fairness. You got indifference. And each time the pain pierces not because the world was cruel, but because you'd quietly written a script for it, and the world refused to act it out. Epictetus called this out gently but firmly. He said, don't seek to have events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly. It sounds like surrender, doesn't it? But it's not, it's sovereignty. Because when you give up expecting the world to follow your plans, you start participating in it as it is. You become a swimmer, not someone yelling at the waves, but someone who moves with them. And this is where freedom begins. You remember a time now, a plan unraveled, a person let you down, a goal slipped from your hands. And at first it stung. But underneath that sting, something else stirred. A small voice that said, maybe this too is the path. You didn't want to hear it then. But now, lying here with nothing to prove, you can let that voice speak. Because here's the paradox for tonight. Letting go of expectation doesn't mean giving up. It means showing up without needing to control the outcome. You still set intentions, you still take action, but you loosen your grip on how life responds. That's what makes a Stoic calm, not indifference but flexibility. Like a tree in the wind, it bends, it does not break. Even Epictetus in his own life faced countless dashed hopes. He dreamed of philosophical freedom while still owned by another man. He longed to teach and was mocked. But he kept walking, kept speaking, kept showing up, because he wasn't trying to bend life to his will. He was bending his will toward wisdom. And you're starting to feel what that means. There's a quiet strength in you now. You no longer need life to go your way to feel at peace. You simply meet it moment by moment exactly as it is. You inhale, exhale, and with each breath you feel a thread of tension unravel, the tension of trying to predict, to manage every possibility, to force certainty onto a world that has never promised it. There's an image now. Imagine you're holding a tightly wound rope. Each knot is an expectation about how people should act, about what your life should look like, about what tomorrow should bring, and you begin to loosen your grip, knot by knot. You don't discard your values, you don't stop caring, you simply stop believing the world owes you anything in return. And with each knot undone, you breathe a little easier, you sleep a little softer, and maybe, just maybe, you find joy in the actual moment, not the imaginary one you planned. That's the gift here. Because the moment you drop expectation, life begins to surprise you again. A smile you didn't anticipate, a sunrise you almost missed, an answer arriving from a direction you'd never considered. Expectation blinds you to these things. Letting go reveals them. So tonight, before you drift, ask yourself gently, what are you still gripping? What story are you telling about how things were supposed to go? And can you, just for now, release it? Let it float downstream like a leaf on water, not to deny your pain, but to open space for new meaning, because life is meaningful, just not always in the ways we expect. That's part of the mystery, that's part of the beauty. Epictetus knew this. He laughed sometimes at the absurdity of it all. He'd say, we suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgment about them. And so you ask, can I let life happen without needing to narrate it in advance? Can I let others be who they are without scripting their lines? Can I walk forward, not in control, but in peace? These aren't easy questions, but they are worthy ones. And tonight, simply asking them is enough. You've already started the release, already felt the lightness that follows, already stepped into the kind of freedom that doesn't shout, but hums quietly like the air just before sleep. So now you soften, now you rest. And you say, perhaps silently, I no longer need life to meet my expectations. I meet it just as it is. And that is enough. There's a calm now that wasn't there before. Not the calm of a perfect day, but the calm of having stopped resisting. You're no longer pushing against the tide. You're floating with it. And as you lie here, wrapped in stillness, a new lesson arises from the quiet. You own nothing, not your body, not your belongings, not even your future. It sounds harsh, doesn't it? But don't flinch. Stay with it. Because inside that truth is one of the most liberating Stoic insights of all. Epictetus said, never say of anything, I have lost it, but only, I have returned it. He meant everything you're given, your health, your relationships, your comforts, is a loan, not a possession. You are not the owner, you are the steward. And when it's time to give something back, your job, your youth, your very breath, you can do so gently. Not because you don't care, but because you understood all along that it was never truly yours. You think now of something you've loved deeply, maybe a person, maybe a chapter of your life. It felt like it would last forever, but then as things do, it changed. And perhaps it hurt, deeply. But what if you had approached it not with clutching hands but with open palms? What if you had known from the beginning that all things are passing through? Here comes tonight's paradox. The less you cling to life, the more fully you live it. When you stop trying to possess, you start to participate. Not as a hoarder, but as a witness. As a guest at a banquet, not the host. You taste the fruit more deeply when you know it won't last. You hold the hand more gently when you remember it is not yours to keep. You live more vividly when you stop trying to trap life in permanence. That's what Epictetus practiced. Every day. Even his own body, damaged and disabled, he treated not with resentment but acceptance. This is the form I've been loaned, he'd say, in essence. Let me care for it while I have it. And you? You've spent years, maybe decades, trying to secure the things you love, trying to hold them in place. But now, in this quiet moment, you realize everything beautiful about life comes from its impermanence. The laugh that fades, the sunset that sinks, the fleeting, trembling joy of a moment that cannot be captured. To truly live, you must say yes to all of it, including the ending, including the return. And so, like Epictetus, you begin to reframe the idea of loss, not as theft, but as nature taking back what she lent you. That doesn't mean you don't grieve. Of course you do, but your grief becomes cleaner, softer, not tangled in resistance. You no longer cry, "This shouldn't be happening." You cry, "Thank you for the time we shared." And slowly, you begin to walk lighter. Because the more you surrender the illusion of ownership, the more grateful you become for what's here now. You start to notice the texture of the air, the quiet company of your own breath, the astonishing fact that you woke up today. You don't demand more. You simply say, "Thank you." It's strange, isn't it? We spend so much of life accumulating titles, things, relationships, only to find that what really fills us is release. Letting go, not in despair but in reverence. Because you realize every moment is a visitor, and your job is not to trap it but to honor it while it stays. So you soften even more now. Maybe a tear rolls down, not of sadness but of recognition, of seeing clearly, maybe for the first time in a long time. You do not need to possess something for it to matter. In fact, it often matters more because it's not yours to keep. So you whisper to yourself now as a vow, as a prayer, "I will hold what I have with care, not control. I will meet each moment with open hands." And in that space, something ancient stirs, a kind of wisdom that isn't learned but remembered, a knowing that life is not a straight line but a circle. Everything returns, everything changes. And yet you are not lost. You are here, awake, and that in this moment is everything. There's something profound about noticing your breath, how it rises without asking, falls without effort, each inhale a small arrival, each exhale a gentle departure. It reminds you, life does not demand your control to keep moving. Tonight, we explore the Stoic idea that confuses many and comforts the few. Death is not to be feared. It isn't a punishment. It isn't the end of joy. It's simply a return. Epictetus faced death daily, not just because of the times he lived in, but because he had already died to illusion. He said, "I cannot escape death, but I can escape the fear of it." And so can you, not by pretending it isn't there, not by rushing toward it, but by making peace with its presence. Feel that. Even the word death brings a stir to your chest. That's okay. Let's sit with that feeling a moment. You've been told since you were young to avoid thinking about death, that it's dark, morbid, unpleasant, but the Stoics saw it differently. To them, death was the great clarifier. Not something to dread, but something to consult. They practiced memento mori, remembering death, not to make life grim, but to make it urgent, to make it precious. Because when you truly face your mortality, you stop wasting time. You stop chasing approval. You stop pretending tomorrow is guaranteed. And you start living like this moment actually matters. Here's your paradox for the night. When you befriend the idea of death, you become more alive. It's not a monster in the shadows, it's a mirror, showing you what really deserves your energy. You picture now someone you love, someone alive today, and you remember they will not be here forever. Neither will you. And instead of sinking into fear, you rise into appreciation. How beautiful it is to share this time, to be together, even if briefly, to love in the face of impermanence. Even the sun, with all its power, must set. But that's what makes its light golden. That's what makes the final rays stretch so long and soft across the land. Epictetus didn't waste time fearing death because he knew it's the one thing no one can avoid. But while alive, he asked himself constantly, what will I do with the time I still have? You don't need to ask that in panic. Ask it in peace. Gently, with a soft curiosity. What, if anything, is worth my remaining energy? Not in the sense of accomplishments, not trophies or milestones, but what feels true, what feels kind, what brings you closer to who you really are. You remember now a moment of aliveness, not dramatic, not grand. Maybe it was laughter in a quiet kitchen, or walking alone with falling leaves, or simply waking up and feeling for once not behind. That was life, unfiltered, unpromised, yours, and death, far from stealing it, gives it weight, meaning. You lie here now not to escape death, but to become friends with it, to let it sit beside you like an old, wise companion, one who whispers, "None of this is forever, so let it matter." And now you think, if death is not an enemy, but a teacher, what has it taught you? That holding grudges is a waste, that chasing more will never be as satisfying as appreciating what's already in your hands, that the people you love need your presence, not your perfection, and most of all, that each day, each night like this is a gift, not a guarantee, and that is what makes it sacred. So let's honor this night by living it fully, even if you're just lying still, even if you're drifting off, even if no one sees this moment but you. You're alive, and that is enough. Feel that truth settle into your bones. Death is not against you. It is the reason anything means anything at all. And when it does come, whether tomorrow or decades from now, you can meet it not with terror but with a nod, because you didn't waste your life hiding from it. You let it teach you how to live. And tonight that lesson lands softly like a feather on water. You are not here to last. You are here to shine for as long as the flame holds, and even then you return, not as who you were but as part of all things. The same way a wave returns to the ocean, the same way breath returns to stillness. So breathe softly now, and say, not in fear but in reverence, I will not fear what is natural. I will live while I can, and I will let go when it's time. And in that surrender, you are free. There's a silence that comes when you've stopped pretending to be in control, not an emptiness, but a fullness. Like the hush after a symphony ends when all you can do is feel. And from that quiet, another Stoic truth rises to the surface, gentle but undeniable. The world owes you nothing. That sounds harsh at first, especially when you've been hurt. When life has given you less than you hoped for, less than you tried for. But listen closely. This truth doesn't come to shame you, it comes to free you. Because the moment you stop expecting the world to conform to your desires, you start experiencing life as it really is. You shift from demanding to receiving, and what you receive is astonishing in its quiet richness. Epictetus, born into slavery, understood this deeply. He said, "It is not things that disturb us but our judgments about things. The insult isn't what wounds you. It's your belief that you shouldn't be insulted. The illness isn't what breaks you. It's your belief that you deserve to stay healthy forever. You lie here now, and you realize how many invisible contracts you've made with life. If I work hard, I'll succeed. If I'm kind, I'll be loved. If I do everything right, nothing bad will happen." But life doesn't sign those contracts, and the longer you cling to them, the more you suffer. Tonight's paradox, then. Letting go of expectations doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. Because once you release the belief that life should be different, you become fully present to what is. And presence is the birthplace of peace. Epictetus didn't rail against fate. He worked within it, not with defeat, but with precision. He adjusted his sails when the wind changed. He kept walking even when the path cracked beneath his feet. He didn't say, "Why me?" He said, "Now what?" And you're starting to feel the weight of all the hidden expectations you've been carrying. that people should treat you fairly, that life should notice your effort, that things should get easier with time. But maybe, just maybe, you can lay those down tonight, not because they're wrong, but because they're unnecessary. The world doesn't owe you justice, love, comfort, or clarity, but you can still choose to give those things to others. And in that choice, something shifts. You stop keeping score. You stop waiting for things to even out. You begin to live from the inside out. You remember a moment when something didn't go your way, yet somehow you stayed calm. You didn't panic. You didn't rage. You adapted. That was freedom. Not the kind that depends on circumstances, but the kind that survives in spite of them, like a flame that keeps burning in the wind. This is what Epictetus meant by inner power. It's not loud, it's not aggressive, it's steady, quiet, rooted. A man spat in his face once thinking he'd provoke him. Epictetus smiled and said nothing, not because he was weak, but because he didn't give that man the power to dictate his state of mind. So tonight, as you breathe and listen, ask yourself, where are you still bargaining with life? Where are you waiting for fairness instead of creating peace? The Stoic doesn't deny pain. They simply stop expecting life to remove it. They don't suppress emotions. They just stop believing emotions should control them. And when expectations dissolve, what's left is not apathy. It's acceptance. Not the lazy kind, but the luminous kind. The kind that sees clearly and acts wisely. So you soften again now. You release the idea that sleep should come quickly, that this night should be perfect. You simply breathe and notice and exist. And somehow in that surrender you begin to feel more in control than ever. Because now you're steering from the only place that matters, yourself. You don't demand from the world, you offer to it. You don't seek guarantees, you show up anyway. Like Epictetus, who taught philosophy not with a raised fist but with a quiet example. A man who had almost nothing, yet lacked nothing, because his peace wasn't waiting on the world to change. It bloomed inside him like a quiet flame, fed by discipline and detachment. And now it begins to flicker inside you too. You feel it. That tiny moment when you let go of how things should be and step into how they are. That is Stoicism, that is strength. And that tonight is your shelter. You're resting now in the rhythm of something ancient, not your heartbeat, not even your breath, but something deeper, the slow, unwavering beat of surrender. You've come this far through the teachings of Epictetus, not as commandments but as quiet invitations. And tonight you reach a threshold. Because now we face perhaps the most uncomfortable truth of all. You can't save anyone. You can love. You can guide. You can show up again and again with compassion, presence, and care. But you cannot choose for someone else. You cannot walk their path. You cannot carry their pain to its conclusion. And you must not try. Because that illusion of control over others is the surest way to burn out your light. You remember a moment now, someone you love was suffering. Maybe they still are. You said the right things. You listened. You tried. And still they spiraled. You felt helpless, maybe even ashamed, as if their struggle was your failure, but it wasn't. Epictetus reminds us, another's decision is not your responsibility, only your reaction to it. You can extend your hand. You cannot force them to take it. And here's your paradox for tonight. Letting others be free, even to suffer, is an act of love. Because if you pretend to be their rescuer, you rob them of their dignity. You confuse help with control. And you exhaust yourself trying to fix something that was never yours to fix. Even Epictetus, a teacher of many, watched students come and go. Some listened. Some didn't. He offered wisdom, not pressure. He reminded them that the gate to freedom was open, but stepping through was up to them. And so it is with you. You can be the warm fire in a cold room, but you cannot drag someone to sit beside it. You can't make them feel safe. You can't decide when they're ready to change. And you can't keep sacrificing your own peace hoping your suffering will inspire theirs to end. That's not nobility. That's martyrdom. It took you a long time to learn this, didn't it? That rescuing can become a trap. You thought, if I love them enough, they'll see. But Stoicism whispers, love them enough to let go. Let go of your agenda for them. Let go of the fantasy that you know what's best. Let go of the burden of their choices. It doesn't mean apathy. It means respecting their agency, even when it breaks your heart, even when their path diverges from yours, even when you can see so clearly where it leads. You lie here now and you think of someone like that, someone you've tried to reach, and you feel the ache of watching them drift away or suffer or shut you out. Let that ache be here. Don't rush it, but also feel gently the relief rising underneath. You're not responsible for the entire world, only your corner of it, only your responses, your integrity, your clarity. You can be a lighthouse, yes, but you cannot steer someone's ship. That is not a failure. That is a boundary. Epictetus would say, their soul is their own affair. And so tonight, you soften your grip on everyone else's timeline. You step back, not in coldness, but in trust. Trust that life is teaching them something, just as life once taught you, not through lectures, but through experience. And maybe one day they will remember your example, the steadiness of your heart, the quiet dignity of your patience. But even if they don't, you were still love. You were still light. You were still free. So you breathe deeply now. And you say to yourself, I release the illusion of control. I trust others to walk their own path. I choose peace, even if they do not. This is not detachment. This is devotion without delusion. It is staying soft without bending until you break. It is being a friend who shows up, not a savior who dissolves. And as you rest, you begin to notice that letting go doesn't mean losing love. It means loving more purely, not for who you want them to become, but for who they are, right here, right now, whether they change or not. Whether they heal or not, you're still here, steady, soft, free. There's a quiet clarity in your chest now, like a candle that has burned past the flickering, settled into a steady glow. The noise of needing to fix, impress, or rescue anyone has softened. And in that stillness, something delicate arises. What does it mean to be truly free? Not free from pain, not free from uncertainty, but free in a way that no chain, no insult, no misfortune could ever touch. Epictetus had a name for that kind of freedom, autarkeia, self-sufficiency of the soul. He didn't mean isolation. He meant sovereignty, the kind of inner freedom that makes you unshakable not because you're cold, but because you're centered. You've met people like that. Maybe you've even had glimpses of it in yourself. Moments when nothing went your way, but you didn't collapse. Moments when someone tried to provoke you, but you didn't bite. Moments when you could have chosen bitterness, but chose dignity instead. That's not luck. That's training. That's philosophy in practice. Epictetus said, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And that includes praise. That includes being understood. That includes knowing what tomorrow will bring. Tonight's paradox is this. The more you stop chasing external freedom, the more inner freedom you gain. Because here's the truth, most people aren't trapped by physical walls. They're trapped by their own reactions, their own cravings, their own narratives. You think sometimes that you need a new job, a new partner, a new city to be free. But what if you needed none of those? What if freedom is not a change of scenery, but a change of posture? Epictetus was a literal slave, and yet freer in his mind than many emperors, because no one could take away what he chose to believe about himself. No one could dictate how he met reality. And you may not be in chains, but what still owns you? Is it the need to be liked, the need to prove something, the fear of looking foolish? Those are the true prisons, and the key is already in your hand. You unlock the door when you say, I will not give my peace away in exchange for comfort. I will not postpone my joy until others approve. I will not wait for the world to change before I begin to live fully. You start walking barefoot through your own mind, noticing where you've outsourced your power, and gently you call it back. You begin to see every difficulty not as punishment but as practice. Someone cuts you off in traffic, practice. Someone criticizes your work, practice. Someone forgets to thank you, practice. These aren't insults, they're invitations to meet life as it is, to respond, not react, to embody freedom even in friction. You remember a moment, perhaps recent, when you chose not to retaliate. Not because you were afraid, but because you no longer needed the win. That's the moment you became sovereign. Freedom isn't a flag you plant. It's a muscle you train. And you train it every time you return to what is in your power, your words, your breath, your attention. Even now, in the stillness of this night, you practice. You practice being with yourself without distraction. You practice trusting the quiet. You practice letting this very moment be enough. And here's the twist. The more you root in that kind of freedom, the more others feel free around you. Because you're no longer trying to shape them, no longer burdening them with your fears, no longer demanding they complete your story. You become spacious. Like the sky, like silence. And your presence becomes a kind of medicine, not flashy, not loud, but grounding. Enduring, like Epictetus, who said little but lived in a way that spoke volumes. And so you lie here now, not needing anything more than this breath. You are not chasing, you are not resisting, you are simply present, and in that presence, you are completely free. The night deepens now, and the outer world grows quieter. Even the thoughts in your mind begin to thin out, like fog lifting from a still lake. You've walked a long way in the footsteps of Epictetus, not as a follower but as a fellow traveler. And now, as we draw near to the end of this journey, one last lesson remains. It is not loud. It is not complicated. In fact, it may be the simplest and the hardest truth of all. Everything ends. That includes the breath you're taking now, the warmth of this blanket, the shape of your life as you currently know it. And even this voice in your ears will, in just a few minutes, fade away into silence. But don't be afraid. Because the Stoic does not turn away from impermanence. They open to it. And Epictetus, above all, reminded us that death is not a tragedy, but a teacher. He did not say this to be morbid. He said it to sharpen our vision. When you remember that you are mortal, you begin to live more honestly. You stop postponing joy. You stop clinging to petty things. You stop expecting life to go according to plan, and instead you show up, fully, kindly, gratefully. Epictetus walked with a limp for most of his life, a literal reminder that even the body will break. And yet he smiled. He welcomed each day as if it had already been returned to him as a gift. So here in this final chapter, your paradox is this: only when you accept the end can you fully inhabit the now. There is no freedom without mortality. There is no peace without letting go. You may think, but I'm not ready. Ready to lose, ready to say goodbye, ready to die, but readiness is not required, only awareness. You remember someone you lost, perhaps not long ago. Their absence hurt, still does. But if you look closely, that pain is braided with love. You miss them because they mattered. You cry because you lived alongside them deeply. And that, too, is a kind of gift. Epictetus said, "Never say of anything, 'I have lost it,' but 'I have returned it.' It was given for a time, not forever." So tonight, you don't need to fight change. You don't need to outrun the ticking clock. You simply need to witness. To witness the life that is happening now. The breath in your lungs, the rise and fall of your chest, the weight of your own body held effortlessly by the bed, the soft hum of your own existence, and maybe the first spark of gratitude for all you didn't lose today, for all that was given just for this one fleeting moment. So you lie here now, not grasping, not resisting, just being, because you finally understand what Epictetus knew all along. Freedom is not escape, peace is not perfection, control is not power, and death is not the enemy. It is the soft closing of a door, the exhale after a long inhale, the punctuation that gives meaning to the sentence. And as we come to the very end of this journey, I invite you to slow everything down. Let go of thinking. Let go of fixing. Let go of trying to hold on. Let the voice you're hearing begin to fade like the last note of a song you loved. Let your breath become slower, softer, quieter. And trust that even here, even now, you are whole. You are safe. You are enough. And now let the story fade like dusk slipping into night. There is nothing left to do, nothing more to learn tonight. You've already received it all. The reminders, the paradoxes, the soft, insistent truths that whisper beneath the noise. You don't need to solve your life before you sleep. You don't need to untangle every thought. You are allowed to drift, to float, to surrender to the peace that only comes when you stop searching. You might feel the weight of the blankets now, how they gently hold you like the arms of the universe itself. You might hear the sound of your breath, steady as a tide rolling in. This is your refuge. You don't have to be Epictetus. You only need to be you, still, calm, kind, not because the world has calmed down, but because you have. Let this moment be enough. Let your body rest. Let your soul exhale. And if you find sleep waiting on the edges of your awareness, don't chase it. Just smile at it the way Epictetus smiled at insult, at uncertainty, even at death. With ease, with freedom, with grace. Tomorrow can come when it's ready. But for now, you're safe, you're home, you're here.